Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Ham Radio 2.0, live from the Ham Shack. My name is Jason, and my call sign is KC5HWB. This is going to be the last. This will be the last episode. This will be episode 46 in my HamCom 2016 forum series. This will be a presentation by the AREDN Mesh Network guys, by Conrad. I forget Conrad's call sign right now, but he's one of the guys for the AREDN Mesh Firmware, which goes on Ubiquiti nodes. If you don't know anything about mesh networking, that's one thing I've kind of not touched on with Ham Radio 2.0, and I'm about to change that. We're fixing to do a few episodes on mesh networking, broadband hamnet, AREDN firmware. AREDN's another type of AREDN's different firmware than broadband hamnet. Broadband hamnet was the original. They used to call it HSMM, ham something mesh something. I don't remember what HSMM stands. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as HSMM. They don't really use that. They retired that term a while back and changed it to BBHN, broadband hamnet. And I've run a node at my shack here on broadband hamnet for the last year or so. Never really connected to anything, but it's out there. And recently AREDN came around. Now AREDN is AREDN, which is Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network. So they took the broadband hamnet firmware and they said, we're going to get rid of the Linksys router aspect of it. We're just going to concentrate on Ubiquiti nodes. And I think there's some TP-Link nodes that they're another brand of radio, Wi-Fi radio is what it is, made by TP-Link. I think there's some of those they're starting to incorporate as well. And they're on version 3 dot something. There's 2 or 3 versions of 3 out there right now. 3.0.1, 3.0.2, something like that. You'll see the version here in the video in just a second. But one of the coolest things about the AREDN firmware that broadband hamnet firmware does not have is the ability for AREDN to go down to 2 channels below the public Wi-Fi band. So like when you go to Walmart or to Target and you buy a new router, get on newegg.com, you buy a new router for your Wi-Fi home network, you go take it out of the box, plug it in, configure the Wi-Fi on it. By default, most of them are set to channel 1. And channel 1 is like 2412 megahertz, 2.412 gigahertz or something like that. You can look up all the different channels. There's 16 channels, channel 1 through channel 16 in mesh firmware, in Wi-Fi frequencies for your Wi-Fi router. And broadband hamnet incorporates all of those. You can install it's upgraded. It's different firmware that takes over the firmware from the Linksys or the Ubiquiti node, and allows you to basically connect to other broadband hamnet nodes or radios or routers, however you want to say that. It's all the same thing, and it lets hams communicate that way over a data network. Well, the AREDN firmware came in and they said, well, you know, amateur radio operators have privileges in the 2.4 gigahertz band outside of and including, but also outside of the public Wi-Fi band. So why not utilize those frequencies? Because there's a lot less noise, a lot lower noise floor on the amateur radio only band, because, you know, everybody and their dog has Wi-Fi routers these days. There's Wi-Fi on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer, and, you know, all the different radios out there that are transmitting on channel 1, 2, or 3, you know, it just makes for a bunch of noise. So it degrades the performance of broadband hamnet or any other kind of outdoor node that you might have sitting outside your house. So the AREDN firmware will let you go down to channels -1 and -2, what they call -1 and -2, somewhere below the public Wi-Fi band. And it's somewhere down to 2402, 2398, something like that. Again, I don't remember the exact frequencies. I don't have them sitting in front of me right now. They'll show you a chart of that here in just a second on the video. So, but once you get down outside of the public Wi-Fi band into the amateur-only band, the noise floor drops down significantly, and it makes for longer distance contacts, higher speeds, better throughput, and just an overall stronger network for you to try to connect to some other amateurs with mesh nodes out there. So I'm going to be shortly upgrading my nano station, my Ubiquiti nano station, to the AREDN firmware, and we're going to do an episode of that on Ham Radio 2.0 coming up as well. So let's take a look at the AREDN Mesh Firmware forum discussion from HamCom 2016.
Was originally licensed tech. I'm now an extra. I spent about 5 years as a repeater technical chair for a local club in San Diego. I had a great time, learned a lot about RF theory, a lot about radio, a lot about repeater sites and what you can and can't put on them without someone yelling at you. So learned a lot from that position. Originally I got involved with mesh when I started the Ubiquity port in 2013. So who here has worked with BBHN or any other mesh solutions? Good amount of you, so you'll have some base knowledge there for us. So I originally started the port. At the time there was thoughts that it just couldn't be done. So I ended up porting it. I actually got involved in it after Andre over there approached me wanting to put a Linksys node on the top of my tower at 6,000 feet where we get rain, snow, sleet, everything. It's like, sorry, I can't justify it at this time. I like the idea, I just couldn't justify it. So that ended up leading me porting it to Ubiquity, and from there I became the lead programmer for BBHN for the versions 1.01 through 3.10, and now I contribute to the AREDN project. Just a quick little disclaimer here. Us IT security guys, we love our disclaimers. Basically, you know what? I'm a very strong-willed, opinioned person. I say some things, but maybe the group doesn't necessarily agree with me. But I work with a great group. They're willing to always talk and discuss everything, and we all come to an agreement. So what I say may not necessarily end up being the group's decisions at the end of the day. So just keep that in mind. I'm lucky to have several of the AREDN team members here today visiting with us. We've got Randy over here, does our website and great on press. Takes a lot of work off me, which I greatly appreciate. We have Daryl in the back, K5DLQ. He does a lot of development with us. He's known for creating the tunnels on BBHN and on AREDN. We have Andre in the back. He basically performs project management responsibilities for us in AREDN, which basically means he keeps us all on our toes and he gets to herd the cats. And we had Trevor here a little bit ago. Unfortunately, he just had to run and catch a plane. These airlines love changing flights on people. They bumped him up about 4 hours. We were hoping to have him here for the second presentation. And Joe, who is not present at the moment, but that would be Joe right here. He was with us when we were met in California. So, what is AREDN? Basically, it's self-configuring, self-healing, high-speed data networking for amateur radio. Now, what that means is you don't just throw up the device and everything works. You still got to go in, you have to put a little bit of information in there. You have to do some ham stuff with it still. You got to know where the other units are. You have to do some aiming. But the network part of it, the internet side of it, or not actually internet, but the networking side, the interconnection side of it, is able to self-build its links and handle any failures. If there's a route available, it will self-configure around it. AREDN itself is built on a set of having focused goals. Primarily, HamCom is the design concept. So this would be Red Cross, RACES, etc. The needs that they would have are what we're going to tailor for. Now, that does not mean the product is not useful for other networks, for ham-only day-to-day networking. Quite the contrary. It's the tools that HamCom networks need make the network better on a day-to-day basis. Some of those we'll see here as we get a little bit later in the presentation. But the tools that you don't need for a network that's going to be set up for one day, you do need more tools for a long network that's going to exist for weeks, months, or years. And realistically, the way we see it, if you're ever going to have a disaster, you're going to need to have some infrastructure out there to build up and work on. And again, it's on the mission statement, there's a set of standards behind that as how the network will function, how it'll operate, how everything communicates, because communication interoperability is key. You can't just have random configurations and expect everything to work. It will just not work in computer networks. So part of AREDN is setting those standards and defining them. What is AREDN built on? Again, I mentioned the mission. The mission is the core base of how we're going to decide what goes in. There's a lot of nice features, a lot of ideas that go out there, but unless they have somewhat of a premise for a real network purpose, we're not going to bloat the firmware with them. We don't want the firmware getting too big with features that aren't actually useful on a day-to-day basis. Again, the standards is what we're built on, so we define those, we configure it. And some of them are defined for us. These devices are 802.11 Wi-Fi. Most of you have one from your cell phone even. We're taking advantage of all that mass-marketed chips to be able to go ahead and develop and extend upon to build these computer networks. It's based on open source software in the back end. The core operating system is a solution called OpenWRT. It's based off of basically original Linksys lawsuit that happened in roughly mid-2000 time frame where they were using Linux kernel, and that created a whole bunch of opening for Linux software. And COTS hardware, so commercial off the shelf. And probably a lot of these with BBHN experience, this all sounds familiar so far from the basic concepts, but commercial off-the-shelf items like this, rocket dish with a rocket on the back. We've got air routers over here, nano beams, nano stations over on the side there. All this is stuff you can buy off an online catalog. It's shipped to you. You're not having to try and cobble together this in the field. What this means is you can go to an organization that wants to build this network and you can give them a line-by-line list of what they need to purchase and you're good to go, which in our case has been pretty big locally. We have CERT teams who are able to go up to the city and say, we'd like to build this out. Here's the devices we need. They're all orderable from XYZ distributor. You can get them next day if you want them. So purchasing agents like that. They don't want to hear, I have to go to my house, I need to drill holes in a box, I need to custom fab this. They want to hear, I can line item buy it and be done. Again, mentioning it's just not for HamCom. Just HamCom has restricted more needs. They need to know how the networks function. They need to know that they can control access. They need to know that they can manage it from a day-to-day basis to be able to handle it when the disaster strikes and you don't have some Yahoo on the backside taking up all the network bandwidth away from you and degrading the network. The usefuls there are going to be, features are going to be useful daily. You're going to be able to use them every day realistically. And again, some of these features will show up here later in the presentation. But you want to build that network out. You want to use it daily too. You don't want to just let it sit there. You need to work on it. You need to train on it. You need to be able to use it. A bit of the history here on where AREDN came from. It's based off of BBHN, which had a run actually going back before 2009, but they've created versions 2009, worked their way up. And right around here is where I started working on the Ubiquity port outside of the tree. They released their 1.0 release, and right at that same time we were finishing up and getting ready to merge the Ubiquity port in with them. Life became busy for several of the engineers on their side. Their main programmer, David, had limited availability. So the timing was kind of right, actually. Ended up becoming with them, San Diego Working Group was who I was working with at the time and became part of it and started helping them continue the development along. And that continued along here through 2013, 2014. 2015 is basically a rename for us. All the developers who were working on it at that time continued on under the AREDN label. Basically none of them stayed behind to it. So everyone continued under AREDN and worked forward. Had a bit of a dev gap here while we were adding some really nice features that were somewhat complicated and took longer for development than expected. But it's had a good reign. And in this time, we're always putting out beta copies that people were trying. So we're field testing it with people. We're allowing you to contribute back. Make sure it's actually going to work when you go to production releases. You don't have to run the test software. It does help those who do. So again, compatibility is big for HamCom. One thing that's been done is the first version, number of the version, is actually going to be the protocol version. Anyone sharing the protocol version can link together. Our latest release, 3.16.10, 3 is the protocol. Anything running protocol version 3 can link together. That's 3.15.10, which was last year. That's 3.02, that was also last year. Anything v3 can link together. That includes broadband HamNet version 3 nodes. So you don't have to rip and replace the existing network. I know a lot of people who are putting Ubiquity nodes up at central sites, running AREDN firmware on them because of some of the new features, and slowly field replacing or upgrading units out in the field. So it doesn't have to be a rip and replace same day. It can be phased in. I will say there are some features that aren't compatible with BBHN because they don't support them. We'll see those here in a little bit. But the majority of that is compatible, and it's mostly around channels, what RF frequency you're going to be on. Again, you can do phased rollouts and legacies. You don't have to upgrade the entire network at once. And that's something I even saw in the BBHN days. There was sometimes a little confusion. We'd say you have to run the same version. It wasn't actually the same version. You just needed to be in the same protocol revision for them to link together. Being computers, there is somewhat an expectation that you would want to upgrade every now and then, especially if there were security vulnerabilities. I'm only aware of one major security vulnerability that we've had in the past that's been patched for a while now. That was in the early 3.0, actually that was in the 1.1 era of BBHN. So that's something to keep up on there. But besides security vulnerabilities, you don't have to upgrade, but it is sometimes there's features you will want to consider upgrading for. And of course, since it is based on BBHN, the BBHN knowledge you have from setting up networks is useful. And I do have to give them credit for BBHN. The ideas of the self-configuring is key there. I mean, I'm in an area where you would think we have a lot of technical people in San Diego. We really don't. We have a few technical knowledge bases, and everyone else is an average user. They know a bit about a computer, they know how to plug it in, they know how to connect to a network port, connect to a Wi-Fi, but they wouldn't know how to configure all this protocol information. There's some meshing up in northwest Seattle or Washington, sorry, that know how to do that. They have great people, and if you have the skill set to actually build those self-manually configured without a user interface, my credit's on them. They have the skill for it, and I'm proud that they can do that, because those networks are nice. But saying the knowledge is useful. Both these presentations have actually already completed for today, but again, both of them are fairly relevant. Glenn's presentation yesterday on what you can do with the networks can be relevant. And of course, Clint's field day presentation this morning. I know he had a slightly rough start. I don't know if any of you were there. But the concept that he was trying to get across, that you can set up this equipment out in the field, is still relevant. And that setup is relevant to an HamCom standpoint, because they will want some of these features and some of these setups. A field day network isn't necessarily the target setup, but it is a training exercise. So the network knowledge there from both of those presenters is still useful. So what does it look like? Again, those of you who have BBHN knowledge, since we're based on it, this is going to look very familiar with you. Mentioning simple setup. You got to set the name of the network, the channel you want to be on, and the channel width, and of course distance. That's all a ham has to set up for this network to start. After that, the self-configuring takes over. There's other options you can run on top of there, servers, cameras, etc. But just to get on the network, those are the simple items, and of course, aim the antenna. And again, going to BBHN, they had this right. Make this simple, make this easy. Don't prevent a lot of options that you have to configure to be able to get on. That's one thing I want to give them a lot of credit for. That design choice was key. I heard about Wi-Fi networking in 2001 when I was first licensed, and knowing IT networks, I was experienced with them. I was thinking, how many people in the county are going to be as experienced as I am to be able to do this? Not many, which meant there's probably not going to be users using it. Bring on BBHN and AREDN, it becomes able to be done. One thing I will note for deployments, I tell people the distance is a key parameter to set. You don't want to leave that at 0. In fact, we won't allow it anymore because we were seeing that happen. You want to set it to roughly the distance, a little bit further than the distance of your farthest device you want to talk to. Set it too short and you basically jam the RF channel. Set it too long and you can have a significant speed reduction. It's not bad to be too long other than the speed reduction. And those of you who are still using BBHN that want to continue it, that applies for that too, especially on the Ubiquiti devices. Don't leave it as the default 0. There's actually a help bug that says that that's automatic. It's not. So just a little bit of tidbit there that applies to both. A few other options down here, completely optional. You don't have to do them, latitude, longitudes, but really that's what matters for getting a node up and online. Well, the concept of an infrastructure. This is kind of based off what we're doing in San Diego and a bit what's being done down in Houston as well, I would say, where you build it somewhat of a designed infrastructure in place with it, but you don't totally rely on that infrastructure as well. So we have backbones which are strategically placed going on in San Diego. They're going to be our high-speed links to get information in and out of areas. So say between Dallas and Fort Worth, between San Antonio on up the freeway there, or even Houston, which I know there's some rivalry between Dallas and Houston sometimes. But those networks can be done across along there. You want those to be your high-speed, well-developed networks. After that, we do normally what we call mid-miles. These will be water towers, these will be buildings, lower mountains, where we feed out to a community area, cover a city from this one, and then your end user directly or your served agency comes in from there. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, that's a failure point, that's a failure point, that's a failure point. You might be thinking that. So here's a little bit of what San Diego and Orange County looks like. We actually have a few more nodes here that are not on this image, but we have nodes strategically placed out here. This is what we call the backbone link. We've got a mid-mile node here and a mid-mile node here. There's actually a few down here as well, linking up to backbone sites. But these are our major backbones, linking over here into here, and then distributing out. What that gives us is actually an infrastructure that looks like a ball of spaghetti. Now, the software knows about all these links between them. There are links between these lower level users that are actually cross-linking. There are links between some of these mid-mile nodes that are cross-linking. And then even the backbones have a couple cross-links as well. So you actually end up with a network that you have a high-speed path that's your primary. But if that were to fail, there is still redundancy from the self-healing nature of the network, where one of these levels can take up the load slack and move it around until you get back on that large network. Same here at the lower. You want to have that primary network designed and developed, but should that start failing, the network has healing abilities to handle that.
So it's running a routing protocol?
It's running a routing protocol in the back, correct, which handles the linking, and all that's configured in the back end. So again, we end up with this ball of spaghetti, essentially. And this is one of the mid-mile nodes. This is a mid-mile node. I think this one was a backbone node. It's a little hard to see my logos. But inherently, some way the traffic will generally find a way, as long as it can find some way to see each other. This is just a photo of what a mid-mile node looks like actually in Orange County. A couple of sector antennas. They've been painted green to be hidden. I'm going to go ahead and grab one here just to show it. Many users don't necessarily get to see one of these that often. This is what we'd normally install on a repeater site or a mountaintop site. Provides about 120 degrees of angle to go ahead and feed out to users. This is what we normally put on those well-developed sites. Point-to-point links might use something like one of these dishes over here for the backbone. But your average user is probably going to use more something like this, NanoStation. Really small built-in device. It can be trapped to a pole. In fact, I got this little setup here I call node in a bag. This is a NanoStation right there on the top of a pole. This is actually the side of my house. And these are the Army poles I'm sure you guys saw in the for sale today. They're actually useful. They really are. So I pack a node inside of an Army bag with cabling. I can haul this on my back real easy and set up. And I'm able to feed into one of those local distribution nodes, and that gets me access. Also conveniently, showing this network here where we have people all over the place, I can see several of the regular users who are not infrastructure, so they provide me an alternate path to get into the network if I'm ever having problems. Any questions so far?
So I saw IP addresses on each of the nodes, so statically assigned? Okay.
Yeah, so they're automatically configured by the system. There's a calculation algorithm in the back end that automatically assigns them, so that way you don't have to deal with that.
Wow, okay.
And again, one of the things I got to give BBHN credit for, that was one of the best ideas, is don't need a central authority. It's auto-configuring. It'll handle itself. It'll create it for you.
So then is the role of the node dependent, is the IP addressing used to sort of define the role of the node, or?
The IP address solely just defines a location for the node. It's an address. That's all it is. What you host off there is configurable on a number of other pages. Do you want to host services? They're done as announcements over the network.
Okay, sorry, I don't mean.
Yeah.
You kind of answered my question. You said announcements over the network. Is it a global topology, or is there?
Yeah, so it's a global topology. Inherently, every device knows about every other device at the moment and where they're at and how to get there. Yeah, so it's OSR for those who actually know routing protocols. It's OSR in the back end, which provides them the information they need to go ahead and link. And then, of course, the advertisements of what's on the network get spread across that.
What build of OSR are you on?
It's currently, no, it's OSR 1. I forget the actual version number to be offhand. It's constantly changing, to be honest.
Heavily patched and modified.
Yeah, heavily patched and modified as well.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
OSR is a protocol that was done for grid.
For mesh, yeah. Yeah. So that's what we currently run on. We'll always evaluate to see if that's always the right move. But for right now, that's where it's going to stay for a while, it looks like. And it's been patched to meet new needs, a few bugs here and there. Quick look at the hardware list. And this is really small. I don't expect anyone to read this. The AREDN website has a link to it on there. You can get to it from the menus really easy as well to see what it runs on hardware-wise. But basically, it's all commercial off the shelf. It's quality gear you can get from a manufacturer made today. Those of you coming from the BBHN side, the one caveat I give is there's no Linksys WRT54 support. They're great devices. I got to give them credit. They opened up the world to internet routing or for modified software. I mean, they were the boom to start the software that we're based off of. I got to give them credit for that. And they've had great with use with the BBHN team. They got mesh networking involved. They got people active. I mean, Andre back there started using the little Linksys blue boxes. And I saw the concept there right then and there. They were great in that method that they get users to use it. The problem is I couldn't install it on Mountaintop in my case. And I've seen other people who have had similar. So great devices, however, OpenWRT, the core operating system that actually started off of those, has ended support for them themselves. Now, it might sound small in many cases, but from a security standpoint, from a flaw standpoint, that actually becomes very critical as time goes on. It's not something that's insurmountable, but it does put more effort on a dev team. The AREDN mission statement came into play too. It's where can they fit in? Being an older generation hardware device, they were seen to have proven themselves in the past, but there was a lot of trouble looking at the feature set of what was planned for the next few months, let alone the next couple of years, as to where they'd be able to fit in. The most capable devices are actually used. They were in 2004. You can still buy new ones, but they have limited flash and limited RAM. And we're talking devices that their sole mission is to take information in and forward it out. RAM is somewhat critical to that mission. Being an older generation device, they're 802.11g, not 802.11n. Now, that might just sound like a number, but that brings in a lot of other aspects. Well, that one's not relevant. We'll show it here in a bit. Faster speeds, more reliability, more sensitive receivers, longer distances. All of this comes from being able to go to 802.11n hardware. Pretty much every link in my city could not be done with a Linksys just because of where we were at noise floor wise, or distance wise and receiver transmitter power. So these ones all have more power than a Linksys does stock. Another limitation is, and we saw this coming up at the time, we didn't have it there, but we could see that it wasn't going to work. The drivers on these is very closed source. They are locked down by Broadcom. I can't blame them for it. I mean, this was also in the early days of Wi-Fi. Who's going to need open source drivers anyways? But because of that, it doesn't support channels -1 or -2, which is something we've added into AREDN here last year. Now, I'll show this a little bit more in a minute, but channel -1 and -2 are free and clear of part 15 noise, and that helps significantly in built-up areas. BBHN had originally announced an end of life, end of support in 2014. So as we were coming into 2015, that was still on our mind as well. That may have been retracted and may now be going forward as still supported. But at the time, that was going through our mind as well. Take a quote from Jim, K5KTF on here. And it actually sums it up really well in my opinion. Basically, if it's a tabletop exercise, if you're going to be using them for training, the Linksys work great. If you plan on connecting buildings across town, go for UBNT, Ubiquity. So from that standpoint, you even have people inside of BBHN recognizing that while they're a great training tool, they may not be the best for long-term real networks. And we don't want to see people invest money in hardware that they will only be able to use in their house and not anywhere else. I actually know Daryl, before we brought him on the dev team back there, he had that incident happen where he got everyone worked up and realized, yeah, these devices probably aren't going to cut the distance that we need out here. Another item is, a lot of people tell me, the Linksys are cheap. Well, yeah, you can pick them up for 20 bucks or you can even get them given to you. What happens when you have to add coax, a box, power, customization? You have to hack all this together.
TNC adapter.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the members I worked with back when I was still with BBHN, Clint AE5CA, he did the math on it. You're basically looking at $190 to bring a node up, even if it was given to you for free. That's less than most of these devices cost. The nanostations go for around 80 plus shipping. The rockets are around 80 plus shipping, and then you need the antenna, but those are higher up sites. Some of the 3 gigahertz band hardware was a little bit more expensive because it's a little more premium. There's less people using it, but the costs are significantly less. So even Clint recommends going with a nanostation. They're great for a field device. They really are. So advancements in the past year, kind of year and a half. Just the map, realistically. I'm basically talking from this time period here through here. The release was here and here, but we had a decent gap here while we were working on some of the big technologies. We were pushing out test software. Some people were using it in production. Officially, I don't recommend using beta in a production network, but some were because they found the features worthwhile. At a new hardware vendor, we don't like to be limited to a single vendor, and we're always evaluating new hardware that can be used. There's always that discussion. In that time period, there's one new vendor, TP-Link. Very much like a nanostation, but a different vendor at least. So we have another vendor to work with. 12 additional device models and revisions. These are everything that been in there going back That's from basically this point on. So 3.01 BBHN slash 3.10, they're basically the same release. There's now 12 additional devices. Now this comes somewhat critical. If you're buying devices, Ubiquiti doesn't change the game all the time, but they might make a small revision in the back end. Nothing major, but they change that. So these are 12 additional devices that can be used on the network, including a couple of them are new bands for 3 gigahertz. Which brings me to this slide. First one, 24 new channels on 3.4 gigahertz. That band has no commercial allocation in the United States at all. There is no commercial users. It is shared with DoD. It is a radar band. How much they use it, there's probably some areas that use it a lot. There's probably a lot of areas they don't use it at all. I can say officially my area is in a recognized training area where they say they're going to use it. There has not been one sign of it at all.
Obtaining those, they're not easily sold in the United States.
It's actually fairly easy to obtain, actually. Yeah. So if you look at
We looked at that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we've been having very good luck. If you look at the forums, there's some links to some dealers who will sell them. You can import them fairly easy from an eBay seller, but I mean there is a U.S. dealer here that our experience is they've agreed that if you put your call sign in the order field, they will ship them to you.
Okay.
So that's in the forums. You can look at them there.
What are those devices, how much are they?
Those ones have a premium. They're probably about 33 to 50% more than the 2.4 and the 5.8s because they're not used as much. They're semi-common in Europe, but they're not getting the mass sales that you will have of 2.4 and 5 gigs.
It's an absolutely magic band because it is so quiet. But I would caution, as with any lighting up any of this hardware in your region, you really do want to coordinate with band plans. I inadvertently ended up stomping on an EME satellite contest by lighting up one of my mountaintop nodes on 3 gig. And I've learned that lesson now, but you just need to be careful about it.
Yeah, Andre, read that line there. Refer to your local band plan for coordination, please, next time.
I actually wrote that.
Is that vendor listed on the Martin website?
It's in the forums there somewhere, and
Okay.
yeah, we can get it for you.
Flight computers and ISP supplies are 2 big ones that we have
Perfect.
to work with all the time.
There you
ISP
go.
supplies and college stations.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid advertising any particular one, but they're all good. They really are.
If we mention it for AREDN, they're going to let us have it a lot easier?
FlightTech will potentially give you even a discount. We've had
Really?
lots
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally, all you need to do is say you're going to operate it under Part 97 under the following call sign and list your call sign, and that generally
They've
takes care of it.
generally been very proactive with it. So again, whole brand new band. That's 24 channels that are open hams only. It's great for backbone links in our experience because you're going to set it up there. They are more expensive, which means your average user doesn't necessarily want to spend that extra money for hardware. It's great for your backbone links, though. They're free, they're clear of noise, build those high-speed network backbone infrastructure, and then feed the users off. A lot of people have 2 gigahertz gear because that's where everything started here on channel 1. Just a software mod, we're able to pull it down to neg 2 and neg 1. That's free and clear of Part 15 interference. Part 15 stops right around here. So we added 2 channels that can be fully clear of the band of channel 1 Part 15 users.
But it is a shared band with RC devices, we found that out.
RC starts just below there.
I think, yeah, RC is just a bit below. This is going to take us to the low of the ham allocation. The Part 15 ISM allocation stops at 2402 or 2400, one of the 2 in there, which leaves us some free channel. It has to be more than that because we have 2402. I forget the exact lower band of it. But there is channeling that's free of the of Part 15 users there, the unlicensed. And I'll admit, when that feature was going in, I didn't think it was going to do that much. I was looking at it, it's like, okay, I'll put it in. It shouldn't be that hard. A few concerns I had to evaluate, but when putting it in, I'm like, it's probably not going to do much. Yeah, I was wrong. Flat out, I was completely wrong.
Well, that saved our whole project right there.
So I was happy to see that it worked a lot better than I was. I was telling the project manager, Andre, you know what, I'll do it. I think there's better places to put it, but I was definitely wrong. And we had links even in our city. I showed you that distributed. 20-mile links off the back of nano stations that were started coming up. Not the best links because they weren't aimed at everything, but 20-mile links off the back of an antenna when you're aiming away from each other, was pretty darn surprising for us. So it opened it up. It's definitely allowed these links to occur, especially in the urban built-up environment. You need to have that free and clear bandwidth we're finding. So that gives us that. And the same thing over on 5 gigahertz. We added a few extra channels there too, a number of 7 of them. So these are all free and clear of Part 15 interference, which can really help.
So the modes that aren't supporting are staying within the 5 meg channel?
We're doing 5, 10, 20 megahertz channels.
And also, Conrad, the one you didn't put up, didn't have the chart for 900 megahertz.
900 megahertz, yeah, my apologies. So there is a 900 megahertz band that we have hardware for as well. And yeah, I didn't put the hardware on there because we didn't add any new frequencies in the past year, but there is a 900 megahertz band as well. Mentioned we increased speed this year, increased the RF sensitivity. That was by going and actually enabling the 802.11n in the hardware. Gives us further distance, faster data rates, less errors across the channel. Now the hardware is self-correcting and it'll detect an error, try and resend the data, but it has to resend it. That causes speed decreases. So if you can decrease the errors, the network runs quicker. We also implemented dual chains. Now this is somewhat a misunderstood concept on these units. Dual chains means actually on the back of these, the nanostations have 2 antennas internally, a vertical and a horizontal. The rockets have 2 ports on them, and they're actually labeled chain 0 and chain 1. Each of these is internally somewhat a fully independent radio. They are tied together slightly on some of their internal parts that they expect to be working together, but they're also somewhat autonomous as well. This allows them to either send the same information at once through both channels to get over some interference, or when the conditions allow for it, use in the individual polarities and the isolation between them at the antenna design to send half the data on one polarity and the other half of the other. That can double speed right there. So that got enabled here this year, which is allowing networks to go forward. And this is where I recommend dual chain devices as well. Even if you don't need the speed increase, the nanostations have dual chains in them. That allows them to have better sensitivity, better receiving. Signals will bounce off buildings and they might change polarities. While this happens, the receiver on the other side can still pick it up because it has something on that other polarity to decode with. A bullet, which a lot of us thought were going to be our go-to devices originally, they're single chain, single polarity. We're finding that that lack of diversity actually hurts the device. So bullets are not actually most of our favorites anymore. The nanostation tends to be our go-to device. Even though you can get an air grid for a bullet at 24 dB air grid, we can find a nanostation with 11 dB can actually perform better because of that second polarity. A couple of RF quotes on here, mentioning the fact that we had improvement with the new channels. This one was Superstition ARC. Their reporting system is actually reporting link quality improvements on channel NEG2. Then we had another network where they went from 100 kilobits a second to over 10 megabits per second. So 100 times jump. I mean, the network was pretty much unusable for them being on regular channel 1. Going to channel NEG2, it really helped them. And it sounds like you had similar experience, I imagine?
Yes, Mansfield BBHN wasn't working for us at all.
Yeah. So that is really, those clear channels have had a significant effect. Another feature we added this year, over-the-air upgrade. And if you're familiar with BBHN, whenever you flashed a brand new firmware image, you had to actually visit the site because they came up in a pre-config mode. As part of our testing, we were flashing firmware almost on a daily basis at some times. And it gets really annoying reconfiguring the same device every day. So that kind of drove this feature to be developed. Now you can upgrade nodes far away without actually having to visit them. This is important if you happen to have a node that happens to be inside of a jail, like somebody I know. Have to basically get arrested to go visit your hardware.
Jim, that's probably you, isn't it? Ours is a 160-foot climb.
Another bad one. So the ability to upgrade these networks at these remote sites is key. I mean, I have a site I can get to at my house even, but I have to go talk to someone and get in the door. So if I can upgrade it remotely, it makes my life easier even, and that one's on the ground. So for those of you with tall towers and everything in remote sites, it can be key. So you can now push the new upgrade up there, get the new features without having to actually visit the site. And a couple users here just reporting their experiences with it. It's all been going well for them. SNMP monitoring. This is one of those features I mentioned that HamCom will need for their long-term networks. If you're going to build a network that's going to last more than a week, you're going to start needing to know what's going on with the network, who's using it, where is it being used. If you're building a network for a day, no big deal. You're kind of going to know who's there. But these long, real big networks, you kind of need to know that. So network monitoring solutions have been put in there. You can use whatever you want. Gagas, Zabbix, the Dude, MRTG, PRTG. Give you items like network traffic, node help. There's a lot of details that can be gathered from that. And we're extending that as we continue on with the amount of details you can get off of it. All these are somewhat open protocols already, or actually very open protocols already. So there's lots of tools to work with this data. But one of the fun ones down here, putting in solutions like that, if you're managing a network, you might want to know when one of your nodes disappears. I had a very interesting item occur to me the other day. My node disappeared. It went offline. And I was thinking, okay, that's kind of weird. What went on there? Pack up my entire kit to go check on it. I get on site. Someone had taken my power injector. It's gone. It's like, okay. The network was working so well, no one yelled at me. No one knew about it except for one person who mentioned it to me, but everyone else in the network didn't know. By the way, this was my mid-mile node. This was my feed the entire city piece of hardware that went offline. It worked around it, and I was able to go up there, replace it, but it was interesting to have that happen and be like, okay, well, it's proven the redundancy concept. It might have been degraded a little bit, but it proved the redundancy.
What's SNMP stand for?
Simple Network Management Protocol, or Monitoring Protocol, one of the two. Just an example of what you can do, some graphing. This would be what you'd set up to monitor some of your core nodes, see where traffic's going, you can find out where it is. That'll help you identify bottlenecks, where you need to build more infrastructure, where you might need to go look at someone and say, hey, what are you sending across there? Oh, it's just video, okay, no problem. And of course, tunnels. That was one of the new features we built into the solution this past year. We actually have Daryl, who joined us coming in off at the same time. He was actually packaging it for AREDN and BBHN when he built that add-on package of tunnels. And we added it into the core interface. And it's kind of a double-edged sword, to be honest. In some ways, you need it to help build up these smaller areas of interest. You need to have your local users get on a larger network and experience it so that they get energized to actually build up and build more hardware. You don't want to rely on it for a disaster, however, because internet's going to be one of the first things that's going to disappear. I can attest for that. In San Diego, we had a major power outage a couple of years ago. Internet lasted about 6 hours, and then all the batteries died at the telcos. After that, nothing. So internet will fail. That's a given. So you need it to help build up that interest, but don't plan on relying on it. It's something there to help you build up the links, but you don't want to count on it. And in our case, we were planning on having to run tunnels in San Diego. Channeling Egg 2 actually solved that for us. We didn't have to do it. But for a while, we were actually going to implement them as part of that build-up. So double-edged sword, don't depend on them. I see a lot of people trying to connect. There's a few tunnel hosts out there that say anyone can connect to me. In my opinion, it might be good for a week just to experience and see, but after that, you really want to focus on just your local area, work with your local hams, and build up from there. So what can you do with it? Well, really, the sky's the limit. AREDN provides a network. It provides a basis for other solutions to be built off of. It is not the solution in and of itself. It's a method to help it. So an example of information, incident management solutions can be ran across this. Put data status on hospitals, power, where is it up, down, whatever your heart can imagine you can put on these things. IP cameras, and I apologize, this is a really bad looking image up there. There's kind of an orange glow, you can't really see it right here. And this is kind of a downsized image from a downsized image of a downsized image I got. But this is when we had a fire burning towards a good amount of homes originally in about 2014. Yeah, the date's right up there. So it's kind of one I like to go to just as a reminder of how it can be useful to actually spot what's going on and get an idea and keep that information flowing. This could easily be a remote silo out in the middle of nowhere where no one's looking and you can identify how big it's spread. This gave us an idea of, is it increasing, is it moving, something we should be worried about. So it was actually nice to see.
This is great for storm spotting. You don't have to send spotters out in the field to risk their vehicle and their lives.
Certainly, definitely got to use.
The camera catches more than the eye does.
That's true, and you can always go back to it if you keep a copy of it too. So you can see what's going on and get that memory there.
And you also know when to send a hand to go pick up the node before it gets burned.
That too. I'm sorry, the node's cheap enough, I'm abandoning it. The node's not worth my life. But on here, I mean, you can see this is a site we have. You can see this is looking at a semi-populated area of Riverside County in California, just east of Los Angeles. Pretty good views. You can see that's going on. A little fuzzy on this because this is a downsized image. But what I really like is this next photo. Same camera, same view, just zoomed out. So, yeah. You can very easily, with some of these cameras over these networks, get some really detailed pictures of what's going on. It wouldn't be unheard of for riots if they were to occur. You might want to spot that. You can see that building's on fire, that building's on fire. Over there's fine. You might not want to go over there.
Can I check on that? This camera has been used a number of times. Ham's asking, can I get to the Pleasance Peak node from my house? Well, let's see, and then so you zoom in, you actually see his house. He says, yeah.
And I actually think that's what this one was intended for originally. I think there was a ham somewhere like right about here that wanted a data check, and it's like, yeah, I can see you. I think they actually did a mirror flash, and it's like, well, I see a flash every now and then. So yeah, I can see you. You should be good. Mesh chat's another technology that's been used on here. This would be your basic person-to-person communication. Very similar to packet typing back in the day, really. But it allows you to go ahead and share that information. This being built by Trevor, actually, based on an earlier chat program that existed that was dependent on a single node. What Trevor's done in the real HamCom fashion is he's built it so you can install it on multiple devices, and they always sync up with each other. So you lose one device, the conversation's still going on. It's still shared. So typical HamCom fashion, it's basic text chat, but it does get that information rolling to you. WinLink, go ahead.
I was just saying, is there any monitoring done on the forward path? You're monitoring, you were talking about the SNMP was on the back path, just typical.
I mean, you can monitor on more of your spread out if you wanted to. From my personal standpoint, where I'm at, I'm not so concerned about the end users directly, the individual devices. I'll be concerned about the mid-mile nodes as well in most cases, but once I get down, I'm not really caring about every single small device. I might start caring about that if I see traffic on one mid-mile node is showing a lot of traffic. Then I'll go and ask each small device, how much traffic have you sent, how much have you sent, how much, okay, I need to go talk to this guy. Yeah. Yeah.
So back to backhaul, it really, I mean, the network is the same. Where, these SNMPs are based on interrogations from the central management server, right? Right. So, it says, give me the current, Ethernet count, byte count or something.
Just typical.
Yeah.
In principle, there's no reason why you couldn't have them monitoring each other. I mean, you could have something that was a monitoring device.
Yeah, you certainly could, yes. It's really what you want to do for your local area. For me, I'm not so concerned about the information overload of every single device. That's a personal preference. But yeah, there's nothing that stops you. Every device is currently having this feature on board that it's available.
So that does FTP as well?
Not on board, no.
It said this is for file transfer.
Oh, sorry, yeah, my apologies. I thought we were talking SNMP for a moment. My apologies. Yeah, he has a basic file transfer system in there too, so you can transfer files. More information is on the forums for it. It's a really great feature.
Are you using AREDN firmware on your backhauls, or are they tunnel through?
At the moment, we're still running AREDN firmware on them. There's some talk that we might consider the AROS. There's some debate as it could possibly prove useful in some situations. All this is still evolving to some degree. The AREDN protocol is still going to have to roll on top of that, but we might use them in a point-to-point mode as well. So you're not necessarily excluding the original factory firmware per se if you don't have to. And there's more features that are planned on that in the future to better utilize those links. I don't want to say too much about them because they're still being evaluated how they're going to work. So I hate promising features that don't exist yet. Another solution of what you can run on there, WinLink. It could be used for backing hauling WinLinks. Telnet RMS is a new feature they've added. Telnet Postbox, right, is what it's called. They've been adding that, particularly for mesh usage, has been one of the key features where they're finding it. Or you can use both across there. AREDN doesn't have to replace your entire infrastructure. It can be used to augment it. So backhaul some of that WinLink traffic onto a high-speed link, get it off of the slow 9600 baud or 1200 baud packet. But you can still let those users get in too. Advantages, faster speeds, larger files. There's a very small file limit when you're doing packet. You probably won't send some of these high-resolution packet photos over packet even if you wanted to. They won't let you. but you can still integrate with them. It provides you that flexibility. So it's an augmentation of your existing infrastructure. It doesn't have to replace everything. And there's places Packet can get in better than a microwave link can. So it can help with that. But realistically, the network is what you make out of it. Whatever you make out of it is what's going to determine it. Sometimes check with your local agencies, see what they need, what they're going to use. That'll help you. Find out what's going to be needed locally. That's going to be your main driver, because if no one wants to use it, then there's not really much point of building it. And in our case, we found what people needed, and we started building from that. A couple of real-world deployments. This is OC Races. This is working with the county sheriffs up in Orange County. They do a large annual event, and this is in the flyer for those of you who've seen the flyer. It's up here in the front, and I think it was on the back there too. They help with an event every year. They're able to provide video footage, and actually they've come to the point that their video footage is actually used by the dispatcher during the incident to say, yeah, I need to roll a few patrol cars over there now. So they have a very great integration from the county standpoint. Passaic County Fair has used it. They did it for monitoring, public health safety, and these are relatively small deployments. These are, let's focus the single event. The concepts for those does extend further, though, to your larger network. And some of these need the actual larger network to help support them. They want to feed this off-site where somebody else can also monitor it as well. I love this one. This is kind of the sort of thing I would do if everything hit the fan. I'm not against putting a node on a bungee cord on a pole. Someone did this. I love it. It's a perfect example of how the self-configuring ability can make this work. So come disaster, hopefully the majority of your infrastructure is online, but there's probably going to be somewhere you might need to feed a particular data link for. Something like this on a pole will give you that relay point to pass through. And from there, you can get it out to your users. Heck, if it's still standing, even on the top of that crane they were building yesterday would be an option. Probably won't have it on there every day, but come disaster, get someone to climb up the top and put a piece of hardware up there. You'll be out of breath by the time it's done climbing, but you'll have a network. So as I mentioned, identify what you need in your local area. Try and start small in most cases. Don't try and build the massive network all in one build. It's going to be somewhat of a hindrance in that case. You want to start small. In my case, I found a part of the city that several people wanted to be involved. I invested the initial hardware and pointed it towards them and let them buy the small hardware, the nano stations for their houses. That spun up the interest in building more hardware from there. And eventually the network has spawned county to county, or city to city inside the county, and it's getting larger every day. The backbone was then having enough people interested in having it funded. Sites were willing to step forward and say, yes, you may put hardware at my facility. So we were able to go from that. So start small, work your way up. Again, find local interested parties and target the areas with the greatest population. You're not going to get everyone on your first hit. It's just not going to happen. But target where your most people that are interested are and work from there. A couple quick quotes on what people are saying. Again, another one based on channel EG2. Basically, going to 10 megahertz at 10 EG2, they were able to go ahead and move on. And they had to move from BBHN because of this, because they needed those clear channels. This is the Golden Horseshoe Network in Canada. Dayton Hamvention, they've tried doing meshes in the past. With everyone's cell phone and all the other Wi-Fi inside the convention hall, and even in this hall we're seeing it. You lose a lot because of the noise. So they had to go to channel EG2 to be able to link around, and they did that this year. They had one on channel 1 just for a backup for some people, but the majority was on EG2 because of all the noise. And they're finding that clear channel really makes a difference. Another one here out of Canada, same thing. It's new channels, the additional features. You went from having 100 signals jamming you to only having 3 devices you wanted to work with. Questions?
Okay, that was the AREDN firmware discussion for a forum topic at HamCom 2016 in Irving, Texas. Good stuff there. Really appreciate Conrad and the guys letting me video record their presentation, and you might even see it on their website. I think they recorded it and put it on their website as well. But looking forward to trying that. So you, like I said earlier, you will see a episode of Ham Radio 2.0 coming up that deals a little bit more in mesh networking, how it works, connecting to other nodes, and that sort of thing. The Mansfield guys down at the MJARS Club, the Mansfield Johnson Amateur Radio Service, they've got 5 or 6, 7 nodes down there, all connected together, and they're running the AREDN firmware, and they're big believers in it. They said that they tried the broadband hamnet, and they were getting connections and throughput and whatnot, but once they switched to AREDN and dropped down to the channel -2, their distances increased, their throughput increased, and their speeds increased. So it's good to see all of this happening and being used for a useful tool. So thanks for watching, guys. If you found me on YouTube, go hit up my website, livefromthehamshack.tv. Be able to see all the episodes I've done and keep up with what's coming up next. 73. This is KC5 HWB. I'll be QRT.